Welcome to English 605. This video is going to give you an overview of the course and an overview for week 1. So when you first open the course, you will see Start Here. Please read through everything that you see. Actually read through everything you see in the course, including weekly overviews, wrap-ups, and so on. So for Start Here, you have the purple box with the artificial intelligence information for Tiffin University. Please click on that link and read it. It will tell you the ethical use of AI for your classes. Then the overview for the class as a whole is here. So please read through that as well. And if you have any questions, please let your instructor know. In this class, we're going to talk about grammar as syntax. So the rules that you've learned in elementary school or junior high are not going to be helpful, really. So for example, here in this middle paragraph, I say do your best to forget what you learned, because we're going to be talking in terms of form and function instead of definitions, but more on that in week 1. So please be sure to read through that, and then see the course learning outcomes. Here's the syllabus, the library page, the course documents, the policies, and so on. Most importantly, here is a link to your textbook. In Dragon Access, you click on that, you'll get your textbooks, A Student's Introduction to English Grammar. It can be a little bit dense, so do your best to wade through it. But what I've done is I've also given you some supplemental grammar information to help you understand it. If you click on this link, it will open up to a new page where each week for weeks 1 through 6, you'll see different sections, and these will explain more about what's in the book. It's the same information, just a little bit simpler, and I'll get to week 1 here in a second. So after you get your textbook, then you're going to need to complete activity 1.1. All this is just the standard introduction activity. You can read the directions, add a new discussion, and that will open up the rest of the class for you. So after you do that, then you can click on week 1 and start the class itself. So in this overview, I talk a little bit more about form and function of words. The form is how we spell a word. So literally what it looks like on the page, the letters that are used to spell it. So the difference between walk and walking is that walking has ing to it, all right? So form is how a word is spelled. Function is how a word is spelled in the sentence in which it sits. Okay, so syntax is all about context and where and how a word is being used in the context it's sitting in. So for example, walking, in this sentence, I was walking down the street. Walking is the verb there. It looks like a verb, and you've probably learned it as a verb. It is not a verb, not always a verb. In that sentence it is, but in the sentence walking is good exercise, walking is the subject of the sentence and therefore functioning as a noun. It's called a gerund, and we'll get to that later. But so you cannot just look at a word and say, oh yeah, I know that's a verb, because it can function as something different. So that's why it might be helpful for you to forget all that elementary school stuff and start thinking about in terms of form and function for words. All right. And to illustrate this, I have the poem Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll here. It's full of nonsense words, but we know it makes a little bit of sense to us because we know the parts of speech because of the way the words are functioning in their context. And I talk a little bit more about this in the supplemental grammar information in week 1. All right, so you've got prescription versus description here you can read about. You've got form and function. It expands that discussion a little bit more. Under open and closed class words, we have the poem, and I talk about what the parts of speech are of these nonsense words and how we know that those are the parts of speech that they are, because they're functioning in a particular way. So be sure to read through that. And then I also have some brief definitions here. grammar is one of those subjects that everything is connected and everything is layered and overlapped of each other. So we're going to be using some of these terms like prepositions and verbs and conjunctions before we actually get to them in the weeks and look at them in detail. So I've given you here some brief definitions so that when you see them used this week and maybe in future weeks where we haven't gotten to them yet, you can come back here and look at the brief definitions and get a general sense of what we're talking about. This is going to be especially important with things like adjectives and adverbs, where you need to know what questions adjectives answer or what questions adverbs answer before we actually maybe get to adjectives and adverbs, okay, or prepositions, what they are, because they're going to be important when we talk about nouns. So use this page, and you can always come back to it. It's always here in the supplemental grammar information. So that's the overview. We are only going to be doing chapters 1 and 2 in the textbook for this week, so be sure to read those. What I would recommend is using the supplemental grammar, or reading through the supplemental grammar information first, and then going to the textbook and sorting out what the textbook is saying. And then you've already done the activity 1.1, hopefully, and then you can go on to activity 1.2. So if you open this up, there are no discussion boards in this class. If you open up the exercises, they're all exercises, you will see the assignment itself. To get to the exercise, you will click on that link. It will download a Word file. And you can open up the Word file, enable editing, and then you can see the exercises for this week. What you'll do is you'll fill out the information here in a Word file, save it as your own file, and then re-upload it to Moodle. Okay, so you have a space for your name. And then in this particular week, we have 4 sections. In the first section, all it is asking you to do is find the subject and the predicate. Okay, so divide the main clauses of the following examples into subject and predicate. So in other words, some of them might have more than a main clause, more than one clause, but you want to look for the main clause. And then underline the subject and bold the predicate. So I give you an example here. This is the subject, is the house that Jack built, is the rest, that main clause, is the rest, that's the rest of the predicate. Okay, so for these sentences, I'm looking for your ability to find subjects and predicates here. Okay, so it's just simple, because that's going to be sort of the core skill that you're going to need to analyze every sentence from now on. All right. In the second section, you're given an underlined noun phrase. So NPs will use abbreviations, but I will always give you what they mean, what those abbreviations mean. So if you're ever confused, you can ask. But these are all noun phrases. All you need to do is state the function of the noun phrase. So these are all either the subject of the sentence, the direct object of the sentence, or the predicative complement. And that just means there's probably more than one noun phrase in there, and your book will explain that as well. So it's complementing the predicate. So I'll give you the first one. All right. So I've just seen your father. I've just seen who? Your father. Your father is clearly not the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence is I, right? That's who's doing the action. So noun phrases answer the question who or what. So to find the direct object, you can ask who or what to the verb. So I've just seen is the verb. So I've just seen who? Your father. That means your father is the direct object. All right. So I've given you that one. So you can go through those underlined phrases, noun phrases, and determine how they are functioning. In the third section, you're just going to, these are all, your book calls them lexical categories, they're parts of speech, whatever you want to call them, but you're going to label every word in each of these sentences as what part of speech it is. So I've given you abbreviations you can use, and you can just go through and after each word, just put them in parentheses, like Moscow is a noun. So just after Moscow, put in parentheses, N. okay? But you'll do that for every word in the sentence. Do your best. Again, I'm looking for how well you can spot these things. And then in section 4, construct a plausible sounding grammatical sentence that uses at least one word from each of the 9 categories, or each part of speech. So a sentence that uses each part of speech. Label them so I know what it is that you think you're doing. And then, just list your sentence there. And that's it. That's week 1. Okay. And then again, you'll save your answers as whatever you want to call it as a file name, re-upload it to Moodle in the assignment. Okay. And that's it. That's all you've got to do for week 1. Then once you submit this, be sure to read the significance and the what's next at the end. That's looking ahead to week 2. You can use the week 1 checklist if you want. That is up to you. But that's generally what each week is going to be like. And I will have a video explaining the exercises for each week. But as always, if you have any questions, ask. Don't overcomplicate it. It may seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's all about how you're thinking. And if you think in terms of form and function, you should generally be okay.